もういずくだけで再生数1万は増やしてるわね。お母さん怖くて見れんわ。
それは古い動画。昔起きた大災害。
Hello everyone, Kaiser here, and today I'm back with a new video, which is actually going to be a comparison video between the 4 Midoriya or Deku action figures that are out so far. So this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a while, and since I'm pretty much trapped in my house, I thought I'd try something different and tell you what I think and what my thoughts are on the 4 Midoriya action figures. That being the Figma one, the one made by Revoltech, the one made by McFarlane, and the anime heroes. Now, if you're wondering, no, I don't have all of these figures, but I've seen enough pictures online, and after looking at them for a good while, I am able to make a few categories which I think will be pretty well for all these figures. But I'll get into that once we get into the actual video, so let's do that right now. So first up is sculpt and paint, and when it comes to the sculpt of these figures, I'm gonna be honest, the Figma, McFarlane, and anime heroes have pretty similar sculpt, at least when it comes to the body type. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but it's kind of hard to really point anything out about them when they all somewhat look the same. For Figma, it's probably the most anime accurate, but even then, it's only anime accurate because it's based off his first costume, and back then he was a lot more skinny than he was muscular. Both McFarlane and anime heroes are based off of his second costume, but even then, nothing changes. But when it comes to Revoltech, if you all know about the amazing Yamaguchi line, you know that they have their own type of style when it comes to making figures, and that's the same for Midoriya, since he's probably the least anime accurate, but even then, I would say that it still looks really good. But it's definitely the most stylized out of the 4 of them. But that's only when it comes to the body proportions of the figure. When it comes to the actual head, that's where things somewhat differ. So again, for Figma, it's probably the most anime accurate, especially when it comes to the hair, since at least for Midoriya, it's hard to get the hair exactly right, since it does kind of change style in the anime. For McFarlane, it's probably the worst looking hair. Oh, and I should point this out about the hair, at least when it comes to paint. For McFarlane, you can see that it's not good, honestly. It just looks like they splotched together some black and green, and it doesn't really flow at all. And even for the sculpt of the hair, if you saw the prototype from Toy Fair, you can see that at the very least it was a lot more spiky and not dumbed down, which just kind of makes it look a bit weird. For anime heroes, I would say that it's a standard Midoriya face. It doesn't look bad, but it's pretty simple with him, you know, looking pretty determined, pretty ready to fight. For the hair, at least when it comes to the paint, it's all green, which I don't like. There should be a little bit of black. And for Revoltech, you can see that again, it's stylized and it doesn't really look like his hair in the anime, but it still has the general idea of how his hair should look. Oh, and I should say for the Figma, again, when it comes to the paint of the hair, it's pretty accurate for the most part. So for as a kid growing up, I had a dream to be it's kind of hard. I would say that Figma is probably first when it comes to sculpt and paint. Second would be anime heroes, because it still looks like Midoriya from the anime. Third would be Revoltech, because even though it is stylized, it still keeps that general feeling of Midoriya, and fourth would be McFarlane, only because of how bad the hair looks. Now we move on to articulation, and there were a few different ways I could have done this segment, but what I decided to do was not count how many points of articulation the figure has, but how well the articulation holds up when it comes to posing the figure. And I think that's a good way to do it, since with these figures you do want to get them into, iconic poses that Midoriya does. So starting with Figma, for the most part, the poses you can get him in are good if you use the right accessories and use the joints to their full potential, but it does have its limitations, mostly with the legs. Like, the range on the legs is good, but if you want to get him into like a dynamic kicking pose, then that could be a little bit hard, considering that they don't go out that far in order for it to happen. Another thing I guess you can count as like a limitation is the bend at the knee. If we're going off the original Figma version, or the original version, not anything customized, then the legs can be a little bit limited due to the knee pads, but it's not that big of a deal, and everything aside from that is pretty good. You're able to get a good enough ab crunch, and the arms the arms can bend a good amount as far as I'm concerned. So while it is good and you are able to get into some good punching and Delaware smashing poses, when it comes to kicks, you won't get that much out of them. Moving on to McFarlane. Again, the articulation is good, but the same problem kind of comes down to the legs, but it's for different reasons. It's because McFarlane doesn't really have a thigh swivel. Like the way that it's sculpted, if you want to get a thigh swivel, I'm going to be honest, you're probably going to have to modify it because of how the legs are sculpted. They're still able to move forward, back, and outward, but yeah, it's kind of hard to get any sort of thigh swivel out of them. But other than that, the legs are surprisingly good, and for the most part, it's kind of a standard articulation for the most part. It is a little bit better than Figma, considering it has double jointed elbows, and Figma can't really get that double jointed elbow action. So yeah, for anime action heroes, even though I haven't seen much of this figure when it's posed, I'm still able to get a pretty good idea. It does have double jointed elbows and knees, and unlike McFarlane, it does have a decent thigh swivel, but I think the biggest problem comes down with the waist. When it comes to Bandai America, the people who are making this new line of anime action figures, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure they worked on the Dragon Star series. Like, when it comes to a waist or some sort of ab crunch or any sort of ab movement, it's kind of limited. Like, at best, you can get a waist swivel, but if you want your figure to crunch forward or back, then it's not going to happen unless, again, you go ahead and modify it. So that's the only real problem I see with that figure. But other than that, it's, again, standard action figure articulation. Not bad, but again, that waist will be a limitation. And moving on to Revoltech, I'm going to be honest, we all know this, it has the best articulation out of all of them. And unlike past Revoltech figures, the most infamous being the Revoltech Spider-Man, you can get him into a vanilla pose and it won't look absolutely terrible. He actually looks pretty good. And if all these pictures on the screen don't show you, you can get him into pretty much any pose you put your mind to. You can get him into some great kicking poses, some great punching poses, along with those accessories, which we will get to. It makes it probably one of the most dynamic Midoriya figures to date. So yeah, when it comes to rank, obviously Revoltech comes in at first, Figma comes in at second, McFarlane comes in at third, and as much as I kind of hate to say it, Anime Heroes comes in at fourth, only because it probably doesn't have that much of a waist swivel or any sort of crunch.
And now we move on to the accessories, and while I will be talking about that, I'll also be talking about the price of the figures, and you'll see why. Starting off with Anime Heroes, it probably comes with the least impressive accessories. All he really comes with is a pair of open palm hands, a pair of gripping hands, and a pair of fists. And while it isn't a bad batch of accessories, especially for a $20 figure, for Midoriya, you kind of expect more. You at least expect him to come with a Delaware Smash hand, but he doesn't. So again, while it isn't a bad batch, it's not as great as it can be. Moving on to McFarlane, he actually comes with two sets of hands, that being open palm or gripping, depending on what you think, and a pair of fists. But he also comes with an extra face, that being an angry yelling face, and he also comes with lightning effects to go around his arms. While yes, it does seem like those effects are like glued into the figure, you are able to take them out. So it is a good batch of accessories, and I do like how it comes with an extra face and effect parts. As far as I know, none of the other figures from the McFarlane line have done that yet. Moving on to Figma, it actually comes with a really good batch of accessories, but this is where I have problems. Just so you know, I'm about to go on a bit of a rant, so be prepared. He comes with a pair of fists, another pair of fists with a hole in the middle, which doesn't make any sense. They could have just made them normal gripping hands, a pair of open palm hands, a Delaware Smash, two extra faces, and if you bought it exclusively from Good Smile Company, you got a Max 10. And I know what you're thinking, this seems like a good batch of accessories, but the problem is that the price of the figure is somewhat too high. For McFarlane and Anime Heroes, on average those figures cost $20 at most. But for Midoriya, or at least Figma Midoriya, it's priced at least $60 to $70 from what I've seen. And I'm gonna be honest, it's not worth it. Like, I know this is a really good figure, but the fact that you're paying that much for, in comparison to older figures, using a clip from Moonshine Animations.
You know, I miss the days when we had Figma like Cardcaptor Sakura. She has 3 expressions, a variety of hands, and a shit ton of accessories, all for $51. Boys and girls, this is how Figmas used to be priced back in the day. None of this two-face, 2 pairs of hands, 1 accessory, priced at $80 to $90 bullshit that we see so much these days.
A Figma Sakura figure from Cardcaptor, who comes with a bunch of accessories, that figure is priced at $50. And again, it has a ton of accessories. But Figma Midoriya, in comparison, comes with fewer accessories, and yet he's at least double the price. It's not worth it. If you really want this Figma Midoriya, as much as I hate to say it, you're better off getting a bootleg, because the bootleg, surprisingly, is pretty good. So yeah, while it does come with a good amount of accessories, the price for it is not worth it. And for Revoltech, again, I'm going to be honest, it comes with the best batch of accessories. He comes with multiple sets of hands and a ton of different effect parts, both for Midoriya's face and also for his hands and feet. He comes, this is the funny thing to me, he comes with the little speech bubble for whenever he's muttering, you know, since he kind of does do that a lot in the show. And he comes with a pencil and his notebook. And he comes with effect parts whenever he's doing the Delaware Smash or Detroit Smash, that actually being the comic book style lettering.
And I forgot to mention this, even though he does come with 2 different faces, they also come with multiple sets of eyes, so you can still get different expressions, which is still pretty cool. So like I said, he comes with not only the most amount of accessories, but they're probably the best for what you're paying, because on average Revoltech figures can be a little bit higher in price, but you know you're getting a good batch of accessories to go with it. Sorry, so if I had to rank them, I would have to put Revoltech at first place, McFarlane at second, Figma at third, only because of how much you have to pay for it, and Anime Heroes at fourth. And now we move on to scale, and for this to be as accurate as possible, I'm only going to be looking at the other figures from their respective companies. So I won't be looking at stuff like Figma Midoriya next to McFarlane All Might, since that doesn't seem as fair. So starting off with Figma, the only other figure we have to compare him to is the Figma Bakugo, and I think this works pretty well. If you're going off height accuracy, like I do when it comes to figures, then this is actually pretty accurate. As far as I know, Bakugo is a bit taller than Midoriya. I think he's around 5'7" or 5'8", so it does work. The Figma Bakugo is taller than Midoriya, but it's not like he dwarfs him in any way. It's honestly really accurate to the show, so there's not much to say here. It fits really well. Next is Anime Heroes, and we actually have 2 figures to compare him to, which is the Anime Heroes Bakugo and All Might. And I think this scales okay. When it comes to Bakugo, I think it works, but it does seem like Midoriya is around the same height as Bakugo, which isn't as accurate, but it's nothing too noticeable. And with All Might, again, if we're going off accuracy, Midoriya, at least to the top of his hair, should be around All Might's abdomen, and it seems like he's a bit taller than that. But again, it's not too noticeable if you're not staring at it for too long. So I think this works okay. It's not as accurate, but it's nothing that you'll lose sleep over. Next we move on to McFarlane, and this is probably the one that has the most problems. Just so you know, I'm about to go on another rant again. I'm sorry, but I can't help it. If we compare him to the first 3 figures in the wave, that being Bakugo, All Might, and Shigaraki, you can see that the scale is a bit off. For Midoriya next to Bakugo, you can see that Midoriya might be a bit taller than Bakugo, which again isn't accurate. And even compared to Shigaraki and All Might, he is just too tall. I know this is McFarlane and they work on like taller figures, kind of like with NECA, they work on 7-inch style figures. But I still think they could have shortened the character, shortened at least Midoriya and Bakugo down, so that they look a bit more accurate, because they are not that tall. And if we compare him to the second figures in the second wave, that being Uraraka, Kirishima, and Shoto, you can see that he's still out of scale. I think next to Kirishima he looks fine, but when you compare him to Uraraka, she stands too tall next to Midoriya, which isn't accurate. She should be shorter than him. She's like 5'1". And with Shoto, he is just way too tall. Even Shoto stands like almost close to All Might when it comes to height, which isn't accurate. So, yeah, it just isn't that accurate when you look at it. There are a lot of problems when it comes to height. But again, if you don't exactly care about the height of these figures, then that's fine. But for me, it is kind of a problem. And last we have Revoltech, which was kind of hard to find pictures for, but I was able to find one, and that's him standing next to the Revoltech All Might. And it does seem like he stands pretty well next to him. Again, these figures are stylized. It does seem like All Might is a bit less stylized than Midoriya, but I think this actually works out pretty well. It does seem like he is around the right height. Again, if we're going off accuracy. But even if it isn't accurate, the fact that he's stylized does kind of make it understandable. So yeah, when it comes to the scale of the figures, for me, when it comes to accuracy, first place is the Figma Midoriya. Second place is Anime Heroes. Third is Revoltech. And fourth is McFarlane, only because of how out of scale these figures are. And now we move on to ending thoughts. And honestly, when it comes to which figure is the best and which figure is the worst, I can't really say. And by that I mean I can't really say that any of these figures are necessarily bad, because well, it all comes down to what type of figure, or at least Midoriya figure, you want. And while these figures do have some while they do lack in some categories, they also make up for it in others. So if you want a cheaper Midoriya figure that comes with less accessories, but you don't care about that and you just want a Midoriya figure, then you'll probably end up getting the Anime Heroes or the McFarlane if you're more into collecting 7-inch scale figures. But if you want a import figure that, yes, while it is higher in price, it does come with more accessories, it's a bit more articulated, and you know, you're into getting it into different poses and stuff like that, you'll end up getting the Figma or the Revoltech for how stylized and dynamic it can be. It all comes down to what you want in your Midoriya figure. And for me, I do have a knockoff Figma and I'm happy with that. But again, it all comes down to what you want. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If there was anything that you disagreed with or anything I got wrong, feel free to tell me in the comments. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.